Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into one of the strangest mysteries of modern times, the vanishing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. The story begins not with flashing headlines or dramatic sirens, but with the soft whir of engines, the muted glow of cabin lights, and the hum of a red-eye flight slipping into the night. You probably won't survive this journey either, though in this case it's only because you will be fast asleep before the plane even leaves the runway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, drop your location and the local time in the comments. It's oddly soothing to know where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drift into the cabin of the Boeing 777, its massive fuselage gleaming under fluorescent lights at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. It is March 8, 2014. Passengers shuffle in with sleepy faces, sliding bags into overhead bins. You notice the mundane rhythm, the clink of seat belts, the faint perfume of duty-free bags, the rustle of safety cards nobody reads. It all feels comfortingly routine, exactly the kind of ordinarance that makes what comes next so unfathomable. The flight is bound for Beijing, just under 6 hours away. Two experienced pilots are in the cockpit, Captain Zoraki Ahmad Shah and First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid. On the surface, nothing about this night promises history, and yet, you feel the faint irony every time people board a plane. They expect boredom, maybe bad coffee, a stiff neck, but not legend. The seat map fills with lives and stories, a group of Chinese calligraphers returning from an art exchange, a young couple on holiday, a businessman who will never arrive at his meeting. Each one is a quiet novel in motion, though none of them imagine their final chapter is about to be written mid-air. You sip from the imaginary orange juice carton in your tray table dream, thinking how odd it is that history is often just ordinary people trapped inside extraordinary footnotes. The engines roar with the subtle confidence of Rolls-Royce Trent 800s, and the 777 taxis smoothly, as if the runway were a polished marble floor. At 12:41 p.m. the wheels leave the ground. Beneath you, Malaysia becomes a dark tapestry of city lights, fading into the night sea. You float in the cabin hum, a sound that's both lullaby and omen. Known fact: MH370 took off exactly on schedule, climbing to 35,000 feet. A routine altitude for a long haul. Nothing about the ascent was abnormal. Flight radar showed the blip moving north, just like hundreds of others before it, yet you sense it, the quiet foreshadowing that this blip will not stay obedient for long. Quirky tidbit in aviation folklore. Pilots say night flights sometimes feel like flying inside a velvet cave. You can't tell sky from sea, only trust the instruments glowing in their greenish luminescence. It's comforting and eerie all at once, like being rocked to sleep by mathematics. Historians still argue whether the earliest minutes of the flight concealed subtle anomalies, tiny blips in communication, irregularities too small to prove but too nagging to ignore. Was it already drifting from its fate, even as passengers reclined their seats and flipped through half-broken took screens? For now, you lean your head back, lulled by the repetition of air vents and the scent of reheated noodles. It feels like every flight you've ever taken. You imagine dozing against the window, dreaming of Beijing's sunrise. But this time, the dawn will never come, not here, not for this flight. You settle into the Isle of Memory, where every passenger of MH370 becomes less a statistic and more a person you could almost reach across the armrest to greet. The plane carries 239 souls, and in this suspended space above the world, each is wrapped in a different rhythm of thought. Fatigue or excitement, you glance at the rows a child curls into their parent's side, headphones tilted too big for their ears. A businessman reviews slides on his laptop, the glow flickering across his tired face. A couple whisper to each other, sharing secrets that dissolve into the drone of engines. Every flight is like this, a microcosm of humanity, fragile yet oddly indestructible in its ordinariness. Mainstream fact: the manifest listed 153 Chinese nationals, 38 Malaysians, and a scattering of others from across the globe: India, France, Iran, Australia. Each one with a ticket stub, a digital trail, and someone waiting at the other end. It was, in the simplest sense, an average flight across a busy corridor of Asia. Quirky tidbit: one man reportedly carried a suitcase so heavy that airline staff joked it might contain bricks. Passengers laughed nervously in the boarding gate. In hindsight, small oddities take on the aura of omens, though at the time they were just the silly moments of travel. As the flight stabilizes at cruising altitude, the cabin lights dim, encouraging rest. Flight attendants roll carts quietly, the clink of cups blending with soft offers of tea or coffee. You imagine choosing tea, letting the steam curl into the recycled cabin air, a miniature comfort against the immensity outside. The two pilots are separated by decades of experience. Captain Zaraki, with over 18 flight hours, is seen by colleagues as calm, methodical, perhaps a little private. First Officer Freaky, on the other hand, is young, only in his 20s, still collecting stories of his first long-haul routes. The pairing feels almost cinematic: mentor and apprentice. Both entrusted with a giant of the sky. Historians still argue whether Zarahi's life outside the cockpit offers clues: his home flight simulator, his political views, his personal losses. Some say such details are irrelevant noise, others whisper they may hold shadows. The truth is, even in the bright fluorescence of an airport, human lives contain dark corners. Back in the cabin, the hum lulls you deeper. You glance at the in-flight map: a pixelated airplane crawling north, across the South China Sea. To you, it's a soothing graphic. A reassurance that technology knows where you are, even if you don't. Yet soon, that tiny airplane icon will vanish from screens, leaving behind only questions. For now, though, the mood is placid. A woman flips through a glossy travel magazine about Beijing's shopping districts. Another sketches koi fish on a notepad. The child who dozed earlier now dreams, thumb still pressed to a tablet showing a paused cartoon. Life, as ordinary as it gets, suspended miles above the earth. It is in these quiet hours, the between time of red-eye flights, when the world seems most trusting. You sip your imaginary tea, thinking how every one of these strangers has a plan, an expectation, an unfinished story waiting on the ground. And yet, at 1:19 am, those unfinished stories will be interrupted by a final, polite phrase: "Good night." The cabin settles into a hush, the kind of silence you only hear when everyone is too tired to talk and too restless to fully sleep. Outside, the night over Malaysia stretches like a velvet sheet, stars scattered faintly above and the Black Sea below, indistinguishable at cruising height. You lean into that silence, lulled by the hum, never suspecting that the hum is about to slip into uncertainty. At ground level, Malaysian air traffic controllers trace glowing dots across their radar screens. Each dot is a promise this plane is here, it's moving. It's safe. MH370 is one of those glowing dots, a tiny speck sliding northward. It's mundane work until the dot doesn't behave. Mainstream fact at 1:21 am. The plane vanished from civilian radar. It didn't explode on the screen, didn't blink with drama. Just faded. Controllers rubbed their eyes, rechecked their scopes, thinking it must be equipment failure. Yet 1 second it was there, and the next it wasn't. A ghost in digital ink. Quirky tidbit: some air traffic controllers reportedly tapped their screens, as if the blip might magically return with a nudge. It sounds almost cartoonish, like shaking a broken TV remote. But imagine the dread in the pit of your stomach, as seconds stretched into minutes and the blip remained gone. Historians still argue whether those first confused moments were handled with enough urgency. Was it a normal delay? Radar dropouts happen all the time, or was it already the opening note of a catastrophe? In hindsight, everyone wishes for alarms, immediate search parties, decisive action, but in the moment, it felt like one of those glitches that resolve themselves if you wait just a little longer. Inside the plane, of course, no one in the cabin notices the disappearance from radar. You picture passengers sleeping, their dreams oblivious to the drama unfolding on the ground. You lean back in your imaginary seat, tray table still sticky with orange juice residue, completely unaware that the outside world is already losing track of you. Military radar, less public but sharper-eyed, continues to trace a faint signal. The flight doesn't vanish entirely. It veers west, across the Malay Peninsula, far from its expected route. This was later discovered, but at the time, the silence stretched. No distress call, no squawk code, no explanation, just the surreal reality of a plane playing hide and seek with the world. You close your eyes and hear only the quiet breathing of strangers in rows around you. The sigh of events. For now, everything inside feels stable, ordinary, and yet, the map on the in-flight screens should be lying. If you could look closely enough, you'd see the pixels no longer match reality. The plane you sit in is already a question mark drawn against the night sky. The cockpit hums with the rhythm of switches and soft beeps, a mechanical lullaby only pilots truly know. Inside, Captain Zuriki and First Officer Freak sit in the glow of instruments, their faces half lit by green digits and orange dials. At 1:19 am. The calm voice of the first officer reaches out into the ether. Good night, Malaysian 370. It is the last confirmed human sound from the flight. You imagine hearing those words, spoken almost casually. They carry no fear, no tension, just the bland professionalism of countless flights before. To an outsider, they mean nothing more than routine, but in hindsight, they feel like the final echo before long silence, the kind of phrase history keeps replaying as if it might reveal a hidden code. Mainstream fact: the communication happened as the plane crossed from Malaysian to Vietnamese airspace. The handoff between controllers is usually seamless. One voice says goodbye, another says hello. That night, however, only the goodbye was heard. The hello never came. Quirky tidbit: some aviation buffs still debate whether the first officer's tone contained a subtle irregularity, too calm, too flat, too polite. Was it exhaustion? Was it stress hidden under a trained cadence? To most ears, it's just a tired man at 1 a.m., but mysteries thrive on such tiny peculiarities. Historians still argue whether the silence that followed meant the cockpit was already compromised. Was it a technical failure that cut communication, a deliberate decision to go dark, or simply a tragic cascade of malfunctions? Theories fan out like flight paths on a chart, each one leading somewhere different, none with a confirmed destination. Meanwhile, back in the cabin, passengers are likely stretching, dozing, or adjusting blankets. Someone fiddles with the overhead light, illuminating a paperback novel. Another presses the call button for water. The ordinary life of a red-eye persists, unaware that the outside world has just lost its final confirmed connection to them. You tilt your head against the window, imagining the world outside a blanket of darkness punctuated only by pinprick fishing boats far below. If you strain your eyes, you think you see a faint glow on the horizon, but it's not the glow of dawn, it's the invisible line where certainty stops. And mystery begins. The radar screen is like a heartbeat, pulsing dots sliding across glowing green. Controllers in Kuala Lumpur expect to see the blip of MH370 cruising toward Vietnam, a predictable arc on a predictable night. Instead, that blip simply vanishes. One moment, it's there bright, tagged, alive. The next, silence on the scope. It's like watching someone erase a star from the sky. At first, nobody panics. Radar glitches happen, storms can interfere, systems can hiccup. You picture an air traffic controller sipping coffee, rubbing his eyes, muttering about a screen refresh, but a seconds stretch into minutes. The unease spreads. Controllers call their Vietnamese counterparts. Have you got them? Vietnam says no. The gap between dots grows wider, and the glow of routine fades into the buzz of confusion. Mainstream fact: MH370's transponder stopped sending signals around 1:21 am. Without that identifier, the plane became nearly invisible to civilian radar. For a massive Boeing 777, disappearing from the world's most monitored skies feels almost impossible, yet that's exactly what happened. Quirky tidbit: some controllers have admitted that at first, they assumed the pilots had dozed off. Imagine that, an enormous jet and hundreds of lives in the air, and someone shrugs, thinking the cockpit crew might just be catching a nap. In hindsight, it's a strangely human response to an inhuman event. Historians still argue whether that first vanishing was caused by deliberate human action or mechanical chance. Was someone in the cockpit flipping switches with steady hands, erasing digital fingerprints one by one, or did a cascade of failures in the plane's electrical gut snuff out the signal by accident? Meanwhile, high above, the cabin remains oblivious. You picture yourself half asleep, obeds in, the low rumble of engines lulling you. Outside the windows nothing but velvet black. You don't know that, to the ground below, you've already ceased to exist. Your family's text messages, if they tried to reach you, would bounce into silence. The radar consoles hum on, each sweep of the green line searching for a ghost that is no longer there. Somewhere in that void, the story of MH370 slides off the grid, leaving both professionals and families staring at an empty screen. And nothing is more unnerving than absence, when absence is the only clue. When the blip fades from civilian radar, another set of eyes is already watching. Military installations across Malaysia and nearby countries keep their own kind of watch. less public, less forgiving. Unlike civilian systems, military radar doesn't rely on polite signals from transponders. It just bounces waves and waits for something solid to answer back, and in those hours after the disappearance, something solid does answer back. MH370, or at least an unidentified aircraft matching its size and speed, makes a wide turn west, instead of flying on to Beijing. It swings toward the Malacca Strait, creeping into a corridor of sky where commercial routes rarely expect a 777. To picture it, you imagine drawing a straight line across the map, and then someone takes the pencil, curves it deliberately away, and says nothing about why. Mainstream fact official reports confirm that military radar tracked the plane turning back across the Malay Peninsula. For hours, it drifted toward open ocean again, long after its last known moment. This revelation didn't become public right away. Families spent agonizing days thinking the plane might have exploded instantly. While behind closed doors, defense officials argued over how much they could reveal. Quirky tidbit: one story claims that a fisherman on the east coast of Malaysia saw an enormous plane glowing faintly under the moonlight that night. He thought it was odd, but he shrugged and went back to untangling nets. Imagine being that fisherman, thinking you spotted something strange, and only later realizing it might have been history's most infamous missing jet. Historians still argue whether those hours of shadow flight were intentional evasions or desperate improvisations. Was a hijacker steering carefully through radar gaps, or was a dying machine staggering wherever its autopilot carried it? Each possibility is unsettling in its own way. You picture yourself again, seated somewhere in row 32. The cabin is quiet, save for the hum of recycled air. Maybe the flight attendants have noticed something off. No calls from air traffic. Maybe instruments blinking strangely, but they keep calm. To you, a passenger, everything feels ordinary. A plastic cup of juice, the glow of a movie on the seatback screen. Meanwhile, the plane arcs silently across a sleeping nation, like a shadow no one wanted to admit was there. And down below, in military bunkers, the people who do notice are left with a dilemma: speak too soon and reveal sensitive capabilities, or stay silent and let the mystery deepen. In those crucial first days, silence wins. The vanishing plane isn't really gone, it's moving, purposeful or not, across radar grids that most of the world never sees. But to families waiting for messages, to controllers staring at their blank screens, the story has already shifted from routine flight to unanswered question. The night sky holds its secret tightly, and the watchers on the ground bite their tongues. By the time dawn creeps across the Indian Ocean, the official search has already gone sideways. Countries scramble jets, ships, and satellites, but nobody can quite agree where to look. The last civilian radar ping points to one spot, the military traces hint at another, and both leave an aching void of possibilities. You picture generals standing around maps with coffee-stained fingers, drawing circles over water, and realizing every circle is bigger than a country. Mainstream fact: the first search zone was actually in the South China Sea, along the plane's original route. For nearly a week, ships combed those waters with no luck because the plane wasn't there. It had already curved west, but officials weren't ready to admit how much data they were withholding. So for days, families were told to hope in the wrong ocean. Quirky tidbit: in some villages on the Vietnamese coast, locals lit incense for the missing passengers, convinced that if spirits had gone into the sea nearby, they needed guidance to cross into the afterlife. These ceremonies became nightly vigils, with lanterns floating across the waves. It was part ritual, part coping mechanism, and part ancient belief woven into a very modern mystery. Historians still argue whether those wasted days were bureaucratic clumsiness or calculated secrecy. Did governments genuinely fumble the evidence, or did they choose silence? Fearing to expose military radar ranges and vulnerabilities, the difference between incompetence and cover-up is razor-thin, and either one left families stranded in confusion. Meanwhile, you imagine yourself seated near the window, sunlight beginning to edge across the cabin. Perhaps breakfast trays roll out tea, coffee, small plastic-wrapped rolls. To you, it might feel like the start of a new day, but outside that glass, the horizon is nothing but endless blue, stretching farther than the human mind can hold, somewhere down there. Ships scour the wrong sea, and you remain unfound, unseen, untouched. The sheer size of the search is overwhelming. The Indian Ocean is not a pond you skim with a net. It's a yawning, ancient expanse, holding secrets for centuries. Even entire fleets vanish here without trace, like the Dutch vessel Batavia, which disappeared in 1629, or countless merchant ships swallowed during the spice trade. People forget that the sea has always had an appetite, and radar hasn't changed that, and so the first week bleeds into the second. Families in Beijing camp out at hotels, staring at phones, waiting for calls that never come. Officials host press conferences filled with phrases like "no developments" and "continuing efforts." You imagine the weight in that room: reporters scribbling nothing, relatives clutching hope like a thread already fraying. Above all, it's the silence that hurts most. A plane the size of a skyscraper vanishes, and the world answers with shrugs and wrong directions. That silence begins to feel less like ignorance and more like an omen, a curtain being pulled tight over something no one is ready to name. By the third week, the search shifts westward, deeper into the Indian Ocean, an expanse so empty it might as well be another planet. Satellites pick up faint electronic handshakes from the plane, tiny signals that suggest it was still flying long after contact was lost. It's like hearing a ghost tap politely on a door you cannot open. Mainstream fact: these signals came from an Inmarsat satellite parked high above the equator. Engineers realized the plane had been pinging it for hours, even without transmitting voice or data. By analyzing the timing of these pings, they traced two possible arcs: one north, toward Central Asia, and one south, into the emptiness of the ocean. That single clue redirected the entire search effort. Quirky tidbit: in Australia, amateur sleuths began drawing possible routes on kitchen tables, using string, rulers and atlases like it was still the 1800s. Some even claimed they saw patterns that resembled ley lines, mystical paths of energy that supposedly crossed the earth. For them, MH370 wasn't just a missing plane, it was part of some cosmic alignment that science refused to notice. Historians still argue whether the choice to focus on the southern arc was correct. Could the plane have landed in some remote airstrip in Central Asia, shielded from radar by mountainous terrain? Or was that possibility dismissed too quickly because the Indian Ocean narrative fit political comfort zones? The debates ripple on, unresolved, like waves that never quite hit shore. You imagine yourself drifting south, endless hours ticking by in the darkened cabin. The passengers, perhaps, are still asleep, heads against pillows, feet tucked under airline blankets. Maybe someone stirs, confused at the silence of the crew or the length of the flight. The hum of the engines fills the void, steady as a lullaby, as though nothing is wrong at all. Meanwhile, ships and planes launch from Perth, slicing through rough seas in search of wreckage. Crews stare at water all day long, finding only white caps and storms. Some describe it as looking for a single plank in 1,000 swimming pools. The math alone feels absurd. Millions of square kilometers, each wave identical to the last. In Malaysia, officials release a transcript of the cockpit's final words, "Good night." Malaysian 370, the phrase sounds ordinary, almost casual, yet it becomes legendary, replayed on news broadcasts until it feels like a riddle. Was it routine? Was it code? Did the pilots know they were signing off for the last time? No one can say for sure. At night, when the search teams rest, families stay awake. In hotel lobbies, in living rooms, on prayer mats they wait. Some scroll endlessly through flight trackers, some whisper to photographs, some simply stare at the sky. You can almost hear the collective question rising from thousands of throats: how does something so big vanish into silence? The Indian Ocean swallows their hopes one day at a time. No wreckage, no signals, no proof, just a blank canvas of salt water and unanswered questions. You sense that the longer the mystery lingers, the stranger it becomes, not just an aviation disaster, but a myth in the making. And maybe, just maybe, you wonder if that was the point all along. Weeks stretch into months, and the search becomes less a rescue mission and more a ritual. Ships trawl the waters with sonar, mapping the seabed as if sketching the wrinkles of an ancient, sleeping face. Every pass yields mountains no one had seen before, canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon, and volcanic ridges that look like scars across the Earth's skin. But what they don't find is any sign of flight. MH370, Mainstream Fact. Australia's Joint Agency Coordination Centre led one of the largest and most expensive searches in aviation history, covering more than 120 square kilometers of ocean floor. Despite high-tech equipment and international cooperation, the results were blank except for the discovery of terrain no human had ever mapped. The disappearance forced us to admit how little we truly know about our own planet. Quirky tidbit: in Madagascar, thousands of kilometers away, villagers told stories of glowing debris washing up on their beaches. Some swore they saw pieces of strange metal at night, shimmering under the moonlight, only to vanish by morning. While most of these accounts never held up to scrutiny, they gave rise to local legends of the ghost ship in the sky, a story told to children like a bedtime fable. Historians still argue whether the failure of the search was due to flawed satellite data, political reluctance, or the sheer immensity of the ocean itself. Was the plane's final resting place always just beyond the edge of each search zone, or was the trail leading investigators in circles, chasing echoes instead of evidence? You picture yourself in the cabin again, the minutes dragging into hours. Maybe you wander the aisle, stretching your legs, brushing against the shoulder of another drowsy passenger. The lights are dim, the carpet muffled underfoot, and there's a faint scent of reheated noodles lingering from dinner service. Everything seems normal, almost boring, yet behind the cockpit door, an entire fate has already been sealed. The world outside, meanwhile, grows restless. Conspiracy theories bloom like algae in sunlight. Some claim the plane was shot down by mistake, others whisper about secret military cargo, and still others insist it landed intact on a remote island base. The absence of proof becomes fertile soil for every possible seed of speculation. On talk shows, retired pilots shake their heads gravely. On internet forums, anonymous users share satellite images they swear contain shadows of wreckage. On late-night radio, voices drift through static, asking callers if they've dreamed of the missing passengers. And you, caught in this second-person haze, feel the strange overlap of tragedy and folklore where grief becomes a story, and the story becomes larger than truth. The ocean, though, remains indifferent. Day after day, it lies flat under the sun, occasionally tossing storms like dice across the horizon. If there are answers below, they aren't ready to surface, not yet. And so the search becomes a paradox. The more they look, the less they find. And the more mysterious the silence becomes. By mid-May 2015, fragments finally begin to appear, small, battered pieces washing up on distant shores. The first confirmed part, a barnacle-encrusted flabron, drifts onto Reunion Island, east of Madagascar. It's a wing fragment, weathered by waves, carrying both proof and sorrow. For the first time, the world knows the plane is somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean. Mainstream fact investigators matched the flabron to MH370 with serial numbers. Over the next few years, more debris turned up on beaches across Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa, and Mauritius, each piece telling the same story of violent impact with water, then years adrift. Together, they proved the plane had not landed secretly, but had ended its journey in the sea. Quirky tidbit: some of the barnacles on the debris became scientific celebrities. Marine biologists studied their growth patterns, hoping to back-calculate where in the ocean the wreckage first entered the water. For weeks, news reports seriously quoted barnacle clues, turning tiny crustaceans into accidental detectives. The results were inconclusive. But it was one of the strangest collaborations between aviation experts and marine biology in history. Historians still argue whether the discovery of debris confirmed closure or deepened the mystery. Did the fragments mean the official search zones were correct? Or did they prove the plane had wandered even farther than expected? Each scrap was both answer and riddle, like puzzle pieces from a box missing its picture. Imagine yourself noticing the wing fragment in the cabin. If it were whole again, it's the piece outside your window, the one you'd rest your head against, watching clouds stream by. Now it's ripped away, traveling thousands of kilometers without you. You realize parts of your journey might outlive you, turning up years later in places you'd never imagine. For families, the debris offered bittersweet proof. Some clutched photographs of the flabron as though it were sacred, a relic of the vanished. Others refused to believe it belonged to MH370 at all, convinced it was planted or misidentified. When truth drifts in from the sea, battered and waterlogged, it rarely feels whole enough to heal. Meanwhile, the official search winds down, budgets tighten, and ships are recalled. After billions of dollars and years of effort, governments admit they can no longer justify scouring the deep. For all the sonar scans and barnacle studies, the core of the mystery remains untouched. Where is the fuselage? And what exactly happened in those final hours? You picture the ocean floor now, dark and silent, Somewhere, perhaps, lies the bulk of the aircraft, wings folded like a sleeping bird, fish dart through shattered panels, currents whisper over metal, and the black box waits in silence. Too deep for human hands, and so the story shifts again from search to memory, from science to folklore. Each fragment on a beach is a reminder a machine built to conquer the skies has been claimed by the oldest force of all the sea. By the time the official search is suspended in 2017, frustration has hardened into something heavier, resignation mixed with suspicion. Governments announced that no further large-scale missions will continue unless credible new evidence emerges. For families, that phrase feels like a polite way of saying we give up. The ocean wins again. Mainstream fact: the joint search by Malaysia, Australia, and China officially ended in January 2017, after combing 120 square kilometers of ocean floor. A private U.S. company, Ocean Infinity, briefly took over in 2018, using autonomous underwater drones. They searched another 25 square kilometers, but still nothing, not a single trace of the main wreckage or the black boxes. Quirky tidbit: in Beijing, some family members formed a weekly gathering they called the Empty Chairs Meeting. They would sit in silence around a circle of vacant seats, each chair symbolizing a missing passenger. Sometimes they left small items on the cushions: scarves, toys, photographs, as though expecting the owners to walk back in at any moment. To outsiders it looks strange, but to them, it was a way of keeping presence alive in absence. Historians still argue whether the decision to halt the search was premature. Should more resources have been committed? Was the wreckage always just outside the search zone, mocking human precision? Or was the mystery useful, even comforting, to those in power? A story that could be suspended indefinitely, unanswered, and therefore unchallengeable. You imagine yourself on the plane again, a year into the future, where you should have landed long ago. Perhaps the cabin is quiet now. Everyone slumped in sleep. The lights dimmed, oxygen thinning in a silence too complete to notice. It's eerie. This limbo: time stretches, reality blurs, and the journey never ends. Meanwhile, the theories deepen. Some point to the pilots, especially Captain Zoraki Ahmad Shah. Investigators uncover a flight simulator in his home, with one saved route eerily similar to MH370's suspected path into the Indian Ocean. Was it practice, or coincidence? Others dismiss it, arguing thousands of simulator routes existed, and one stray file proves nothing. Conversations drift late into the night on forums and podcasts. Someone swears they've seen satellite photos of an island airstrip with strange shadows. Another insists the youth's military base at Diego Garcia must be involved, because how could the world's most surveilled airspace miss a jumbo jet? The lack of answers becomes the perfect soil for endless speculation. Still, you return to the quiet image of the sea. Somewhere beneath those shifting waves, 239 stories rest together, unread chapters of lives, silenced mid-flight. For now, they wait in the deep, their secrets untouched, and the world, reluctantly, begins to move on, though not everyone agrees that it should. As the years pass, Flight MH370 fades from front-page news into a strange twilight of half-memory. People mention it with the same tone reserved for ghost stories or unsolved riddles, something too large to forget, but too slippery to grasp. Families still gather. Anniversaries still come, but the world at large has shifted its gaze to newer headlines. Mainstream fact: every March, memorials are held in Kuala Lumpur, Beijing, and other cities connected to the passengers. Candles flicker, names are read aloud, and photographs line the walls. The ceremonies are quiet, often underreported, but they carry a weight heavier than grand parades. It is grief, distilled and persistent, marking time like rings in a tree. Quirky tidbit: in some Malaysian towns, murals began to appear, street art depicting planes vanishing into clouds, surrounded by stars or ocean waves. One painting showed a child holding a kite shaped like MH370, the string trailing off into the sky. Locals treated these images almost like shrines, leaving flowers and incense beneath them, blurring the line between public art and public mourning. Historians still argue whether MH370 should be treated as a closed case or a living mystery. The official line that it ended somewhere in the Indian Ocean is neat, but incomplete. Without the fuselage, without the black boxes, the story lacks an ending. Should history record it as solved by circumstance, or leave it open until undeniable evidence surfaces? You picture yourself as a passenger frozen in time, drifting endlessly above the ocean. Birthdays pass below, seasons change, whole years roll by, but inside the cabin it's always night. Your coffee remains lukewarm. Your headphones play the same playlist. Your seatbelt light still glows red. It's unsettling, this sense of suspended existence, like being a ghost while still alive. Meanwhile, researchers revisit the data again and again. Some reanalyze satellite arcs with newer methods, insisting the plane may have veered even farther south. Others speculate about mechanical failure, fire, or hypoxia, a slow leak of oxygen leaving everyone unconscious as the autopilot carried the jet into oblivion. Each theory fits part of the puzzle, but none explains it all. And then there's the silence of governments, which fuels suspicion. Why were some radar logs delayed in release? Why did certain countries remain so guarded with data that could have clarified the route? Historians wonder if national security concerns overshadowed human urgency. If pride or secrecy mattered more than truth. The story endures because absence itself is a character here. The missing plane, the missing answers, the missing closure. You realize that mysteries like this never fully fade, they calcify into cultural memory, living on in whispers, in art, in quiet debates at late-night cafes. And so Flight MH370 drifts onward, not only in the sea, but in the minds of everyone who cannot quite let it go. By now, a decade has nearly passed, and the mystery of MH370 has transformed into something more than a missing plane. It has become a mirror reflecting how humans handle the unknown. In living rooms, classrooms, and documentaries, the story resurfaces like a recurring dream. Unresolved yet oddly comforting in its persistence. Mainstream fact: international aviation agencies responded to the disappearance with new safety measures. All commercial flights are now required to report their position every 15 minutes, with newer systems updating automatically via satellite. The hope is simple, that another jetliner will never be able to vanish in the same way. In that sense, the passengers of MH370 reshaped the rules of the sky, even in absence. Quirky tidbit: in a village in Madagascar, locals once claimed a plastic tray table from the aircraft was used as a makeshift kitchen shelf. Whether or not it was authentic, people treated it as a relic, An object infused with the aura of a mystery greater than themselves, like holy fragments of saints in the Middle Ages. Even the most ordinary object became precious when linked to a vanished vessel. Historians still argue whether the tragedy of MH370 marks the end of an era of blind faith in aviation. For decades, flying was considered the safest and most predictable mode of travel, but the idea that a 777 an advanced, modern aircraft could slip off the map reminds us of older fears that the sky is vast, that technology fails, and that control is sometimes an illusion. You picture yourself on the plane once more, only now you've stopped wondering if anyone will find you. Maybe you're reclined in your seat, resigned, watching the endless stretch of stars outside the window. There's no destination anymore, just perpetual motion and eternal red-eye flight with no morning landing. It is terrifying, and oddly soothing, in the same way unsolved mysteries always are. Meanwhile, television producers spin the story into countless specials: The Vanished Flight, The Plane That Disappeared, Secrets of the Indian Ocean. Some strike somber tones, others lean into the sensational. But late at night, when viewers watch in dimly lit living rooms, the story always lands the same way, like a ghost pressing gently at the edge of their imagination. And for the families, the rituals endure. Each year they gather, not only to mourn but to insist that the world remember. They light candles, release white balloons, and read aloud names that the sea has tried to silence. Even in absence, those voices persist. Carried forward by love, stubborn against the tide of forgetting, the mystery continues, not because we lack answers, but because those answers rest too far beneath the waves. Until they are raised, MH370 remains suspended between fact and fable, half history, half haunting. The further you drift into the years after the disappearance, the more MH370 feels less like a single event and more like a symbol. It represents the limits of knowledge, the fragility of certainty, and the uncomfortable truth that even in an age of satellites and instant communication, entire stories can still slip away. Mainstream Fact: The official investigation's final report, released in 2018, admitted it could not determine the cause of the disappearance. No mechanical failure, no clear evidence of hijacking, no definitive human error could be proven. For all its technical detail and sober language, the report ended with a line that sounded almost helpless: the team is unable to determine the real cause. That single sentence left the mystery intact. Quirky tidbit: a group of artists in Australia staged an installation called The Unfound Flight. It consisted of 239 empty airplane seats, ranged in neat rows inside a warehouse, each with a pair of headphones playing ocean sounds. Visitors walk silently among them, listening to waves crash where voices should have been. Some cried, some laughed nervously, and some just sat down, waiting for a safety briefing that never came. Historians still argue whether the persistence of MH370 in global imagination has more to do with the tragedy itself, or with the era in which it occurred. If it had happened in 1974, would it simply be another unsolved aviation loss, buried in archives? Or does it haunt us more because it happened in the 21st century, when we expect technology to banish mystery? You picture yourself again in the cabin, as if the years haven't passed at all. Maybe you stand at the galley, sipping lukewarm tea, feeling the faint vibration of the engines through your feet, The attendants are nowhere to be seen. The POS system crackles once, then falls silent. Round you, passengers murmur in half-sleep. Everything feels both ordinary and impossible, the way dreams often do. Meanwhile, the theories refuse to die. Books are published with bold titles. Documentaries hint at cover-ups. Amateur detectives pore over maps online late into the night. For every piece of evidence, there is a counterpoint, a yes, but that keeps the wheel spinning. The story resists stillness, just as the ocean resists giving up its secrets. And yet, despite the noise, there's also calm, the silence of the wreck, the stillness of the ocean floor, the unbroken rhythm of waves. All of it feels almost meditative, as if the planet itself insists on keeping this mystery cradled in its depths. In this way, MH370 drifts between worlds, part fact, part folklore, part quiet reminder that certainty is never guaranteed. By the time you arrive at the present day, the MH370 mystery feels like an echo that never quite fades. The official search vessels have returned to port, sonar arrays are stored away in warehouses, and yet the unanswered questions still hover in the public imagination like contrails across a twilight sky. Mainstream fact: in 2019, Malaysia's government declared the search suspended until credible new evidence emerges. No new search has been launched since, despite periodic petitions from family members and independent experts. The ocean remains vast, and governments after billions spent hesitate to commit again. Quirky tidbit: in the Maldives, some islanders still tell stories of a giant plane flying unusually low on the morning MH370 vanished. Locals described it as loud, with unusual markings, though skeptics argue it was probably just a cargo flight. Still, the tale passes around like folklore. Woven into fishing stories told at night, historians still argue whether the entrance of MH370's mystery lies in human psychology more than in aviation science. People, after all, crave closure. The lack of debris, the absence of bodies, the silence from the cockpit, these create a vacuum. And human beings cannot leave a vacuum alone. We fill it with theories, stories, whispers of aliens, or secret landings. You find yourself once again seated by that imagined window. The cabin is quiet, except for the soft hum of engines and the faint shuffle of feet in the aisle. You lean your head back, eyes half closed, and imagine the horizon stretching endlessly below. Water, stars, silence. You do not know what happened, and maybe you never will, but in that unknowing lies a strange kind of peace. The vanishing of flight MH370 has become more than a disappearance, it is a mirror. It reflects our faith in technology, our impatience with uncertainty, and our inability to resist telling stories in the gaps. You realize, perhaps with a touch of drowsy resignation, that the truth, if it exists, may forever remain beneath the waves. And as you breathe slower, your thoughts ripple out like sonar pings in a dark ocean, fading, fading, fading. Now, as we let go of the heavy weight of unanswered questions, you feel the story begin to dissolve into something softer. The search ships return to their harbors, the maps roll themselves up, and the late-night arguments over radar data fall quiet. What remains is not urgency, but a lull, like the ocean itself when the wind dies down. You picture the waves again, but not the restless, crashing kind. Tonight, they move in long, slow sighs, each swell carrying you further from the sharpness of mystery and closer to the gentle rhythm of rest. The stars above, scattered like quiet lanterns, do not demand explanations. They simply shine, indifferent to your questions, patient as they have always been. The cabin lights dim in your imagination, rows of seats blur, conversations fade, and the hum of the engines becomes less a sound than a sensation. A low vibration that steadies your breathing. Each exhale releases a little more tension, a little more of that human need to solve everything before sleep. Not all stories end neatly, and that is all right. What matters now is not the missing plane, but the comfort of release. You let the unknown rest where it belongs, somewhere deep, unreachable, and you trust that you don't have to hold it. You are safe in this moment, surrounded by the soft hum of your room, the air gently moving, your body sinking deeper into stillness. Soon, the mystery fades into background haze, and only calm remains. You float between thoughts and dreams, between questions and silence, until sleep folds around you like a blanket. And with that, our journey together tonight comes to a close. End of script. Sweet dreams.